He left me at the peak of a summer that seemed to promise everything. And he was gone as if nothing had happened. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. Just a sudden void where whispered promises between kisses and plans made with the innocence of those who believe time waits for lovers once stood. I remember exactly how it felt to sit on the porch with my heart in suspense, waiting for a message, a sign, anything to prove it wasn't real. But time passed, and he didn't return. And I learned, in the bitterest way, that some people love us enough to leave, but not enough to stay. My name is Misty, and for a long time, the love that was torn from me became the loudest silence within me. I moved on, not in the way others call overcoming, but in the way that's possible, putting a smile out front and the absence behind a door where no one could see it. Until the day, after 17 years, he came back. It was an ordinary afternoon. I'd just left work, grabbed my usual coffee, sat on my usual bench, and started watching the street as I did on so many other evenings. The difference was that this time, among the people coming and going with their usual haste, there was a face that stopped me cold. Him. Aged, yes. More serious, quieter, his shoulders slightly hunched by time. But it was him. The same eyes, the same way of looking at me as if my presence were the only thing that mattered in that moment. My body froze. My mind tried to deny it. It was impossible. He couldn't be there. But he was. And when he called my name, my full name, spoken in the voice I knew better than I cared to admit, I knew that everything I'd buried with such effort was still alive, pulsing beneath the skin of the woman I'd become. Misty. He said it as if my absence had hurt him too, as if the time between us had paused, waiting for this moment. And even before any explanation, even with the hurt clinging to my chest like an old scar, my heart already knew that love hadn't ended. It had only been interrupted. He sat beside me with the caution of someone unsure if they're still welcome, as if asking permission with his silence. And I, even with my heart racing, stayed still. I didn't touch him. I didn't push him away. I stayed there, trying to understand how a face so absent for so long could still hold such power over me. I felt anger, but it was an old anger, no longer burning. It just ached like a wound that healed crooked. He didn't start with apologies. He didn't try to justify what he'd done. He simply said, "I never stopped thinking about you." And I wanted to scream. I wanted to say that thinking isn't the same as staying, that remembering isn't the same as remaining. But my voice didn't come. Because instead of anger, something else took hold of me. A deep pain, full of unlived love, unasked questions, endings that were never truly endings. We sat there for long minutes, talking with our eyes, like revisiting a movie we'd both seen. But that, suddenly, changed its script. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, gravelly, as if each word had to cross an entire lifetime. He said he had to leave for reasons that, with the maturity suffering brings, he now recognized as cowardly. He said he was afraid, felt too small for what he felt for me, thought disappearing would spare me the pain of sharing a life with a man who didn't yet know who he was. And for a moment I saw myself in my early 20s again, looking at him and wanting to believe every word. But now I was different. I wasn't the girl waiting for messages that never came. I was a whole, woman-marked rebuilt, and yet a part of me was still his. The pain of absence, over time, stops being a scream and becomes an echo. And sitting there, beside the man who broke me, I realized that echo still reverberated within me, but not to hurt me. It was there, as a living reminder that true love, even wounded, keeps existing. And I didn't yet know what to do with all of it. I didn't know if he'd returned out of impulse, regret, or love. But the fact was, he returned, and that simple truth was enough to dismantle the defenses I'd spent years building. I didn't ask for answers, not yet. But that day, after so many others sitting on that same bench waiting for nothing, I was finally not alone. In the days that followed, everything in me wavered between reason and instinct. Reason told me to keep my distance, to protect myself, to not let someone who left me once have the chance to leave again. But instinct, that silent traitor, whispered things I couldn't ignore, like the way he still looked at me, not with nostalgia, but with a deep, almost reverent regret, as if every second by my side now was an attempt to give back what he never had the chance to give. And I, as much as I'd learned to protect myself, couldn't pretend that reunion wasn't stirring everything inside me. He didn't try to rush anything. He just reappeared calmly in the places I was used to being alone. He offered companionship in silence, like someone who knows words aren't enough when what was broken was time. We talked little by little about the lives we'd lived apart, the paths we'd taken, the versions of ourselves born from absence. He told me he tried to move on, lived good things, but never with the same intensity. That everything seemed too right or too easy, but never whole. And I understood, because my life had moved on too. Work, friends, commitments, even some lukewarm relationships that taught me to distinguish presence from connection. But there was never another like him, never another with whom. My silence felt so comfortable, and now there we were, two marked adults, looking at each other with the strange sense that something hadn't ended, only paused. I started noticing details only time teaches you to value. The way he listened with real attention, without haste. How he didn't try to justify himself when I mentioned the past, but accepted every pain I expressed as someone owning their mistake. He didn't want absolution. He wanted transparency, and that, to me, meant more than any apology. As the days passed, I found myself waiting for him again, as if each conversation were a step toward something we couldn't name but knew existed. A restart, perhaps, not where things stopped, but somewhere new, more mature, more honest, more ours. And it was in that uncertain, tender beginning that I realized something hard to admit. I still loved him. Not with the same naivety as before, but with a clarity only those who've lost can feel. The love wasn't intact. It had scars, memories that still hurt, broken parts. But it also had roots, deep ones. And even after so many years apart, he was still the place where my soul found peace. As weeks went by, I noticed my resistance wasn't as firm as before. Not because I'd forgotten what he did, but because what he was now, the way he looked at me, the gentleness in his approach, the respect he showed for my pain, was slowly overshadowing what he'd been. And that scared me, because allowing yourself to feel again is, in a way, accepting that the heart will take risks, that the defenses built with such effort can crumble with a single good memory, or a simple gesture, like his fingers brushing mine during a conversation where we laughed about something small. I wasn't just reliving an old love. I was, in truth, meeting a new version of him, and of myself. And that discovery, while warming me inside, left me exposed in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. He started seeking me out more often. He'd call to ask if I wanted to walk, grab a coffee, just talk. And he never pushed for more than presence. It was as if he knew I now needed control, that it was my turn to set the pace. And even with all that kindness, something pulsed between us. It was clear in the silences, the lingering looks, the way our conversations always ended more intimate than we intended. I caught myself studying his face, the marks of time accumulated since we were last together. And curiously, I didn't see loss there, I saw truth. He was more man, more whole, less impulsive, more attentive. And that touched me in a place I thought had long gone dormant. But with the closeness came ghosts. I started dreaming of the day he left, reliving old scenes as if they'd happened yesterday. And even though he was here now, willing and present, I still carried that girl who sat on the porch, waiting for an explanation that never came. Part of me still wanted answers, not to punish, but to understand. And he knew it. One night, as we walked slowly by the city lake, he stopped, looked into my eyes and said with a steady voice, "Misty, I was a coward. I was afraid I wasn't enough for you. And instead of staying and fighting, I ran. And I spent years thinking forgetting. You was the best way to spare you from me." I didn't respond right away, because sometimes hearing the truth hurts more than assuming. But in that moment, what I saw in his eyes wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. And that subtle, immense difference gave me something I didn't even know I needed. Relief. For the first time in years, the void he'd left seemed at last to be filled with something real. That night was the turning point. No kiss, no embrace. Just that look of his, heavy with a sincerity that undid me inside. I went home in silence, with heavy steps and a light heart. A strange combination only understood when carrying an old pain that finally finds rest. For days, I replayed everything he said, every word, every pause, as if trying to absorb all the pieces missing from my story. And in that process, I realized something that caught me off guard. I wasn't just reconsidering loving again. I was recognizing that deep down, I'd never stopped loving. But with that realization came fear, a calm but deep fear. Because love, after being interrupted, returns with added layers, with questions that didn't exist before, with healed but sensitive wounds. I needed to know if this love now blossoming had space in my present, not just in my heart, but in the life I'd built in his absence. The woman he left behind wasn't the same one he was finding now, and though the feelings were familiar, I no longer belonged to myself the same way. I'd learned to live without him. I'd sustained myself alone, and maybe because of that, I knew if I said yes now, it would be with a strength that didn't exist before. It would be by choice, not need. On a rainy afternoon, after a whole week without seeing him, I found him waiting for me at the same cafe where it all restarted. He stood when he saw me, with a restrained, almost tense smile. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the raindrops on the window. And then, without warning, he took my hand. "Misty," he said, "I didn't come back expecting things to be like before. I came back because I loved you in the past, lost you along the way, and love you now like I've never loved anyone. And if there's a space, however small, for me in your life, I want to earn it." That's when something inside me settled. The waiting, the hurt, the pride, the silence. It all seemed to dissolve in that simple, human confession. I didn't need promises anymore. I didn't need him whole, fixed, perfect. I just needed to know he was here, now, with the courage he lacked before. And he was. The next morning, I opened my bedroom window and felt the air like someone breathing for the first time after being submerged for too long. There was a different calm in me. Not euphoria, nor exaggerated romance. It was a peace that comes only when the soul finally finds a rest in the place it was never meant to be torn from. I'd spent so much time believing the love we had was a thing of youth, one of those stories, kept as fond memories and nothing more. But now I knew it wasn't. It wasn't a memory. It was a seed that survived the drought, waited silently and was finally ready to bloom. And the most beautiful part was that I wasn't afraid. For the first time, loving didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a firm, calm, mature choice. In the days that followed, we made space for each other with the care of those who've lost before. We didn't rush, didn't pretend we knew everything, didn't try to make up for the years gone by. We just started. He became part of my routine slowly, with small gestures. He'd drive me to work, pick me up when he could, leave flowers at my door with notes that said more than long words ever could. And I welcomed him. Not as someone forgiving, but as someone recognizing, because the woman he found again was different, and so was he. And it was exactly this new version of us that made everything more beautiful, because now we knew the value of what we were building. We knew what absence was, and so we valued presence all the more. Over time, people around us started to notice. Some were surprised, others just smiled as if they'd known all along. And curiously, I cared little about what they thought, because what we lived now didn't need validation. It was a quiet, steady love, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It was him waiting for me with hot coffee. It was me resting my head on his shoulder at the end of the day. It was the conversation before bed, the respect in disagreements, the lightness of those who no longer need to compete for space. And in all of it was a truth so deep, so real, it was impossible not to call it a miracle. The miracle of two, who lost each other and still found each other again. Today, when I look at him sitting on the porch reading the paper, or watching me silently as I tend the garden, I think of everything we went through, and I think love didn't triumph because he returned. Love triumphed because even after so much time, there was still something in me ready to receive him. And maybe that's the most beautiful thing about true love. It doesn't demand perfection. It just asks for space. And when it finally finds, it stays. Today, when he holds my hand in the middle of the street, like he's holding an entire life, I understand that it doesn't matter how much time has passed, how many versions of us existed in the interim, or how many nights I cried, not knowing if I'd ever see him again. It was all worth it. Because love didn't arrive perfect. It arrived wounded, real, and stronger than before. We don't need to prove anything to anyone. One look between us is enough to know we've won. He returned. But more than that, he stayed. And I, Misty, I'm no longer the woman who waited. I'm the woman who chose, and was chosen, at last, wholly.